Did God make the universe, or did it make itself by accident? A very big question, and one that is not as difficult as you think to answer, because it is scientifically agreed that the Big Bang created the universe, and within the first few seconds of the bang, the universe was billions of miles deep. But who or what caused the universe to come into existence in the first place? Was it designed and executed by a supernatural intelligence, or did the bang simply happen by accident? In other words, did the universe suddenly, and for no apparent reason, make itself from nothing, caused by nothing? Well, if you believe that there is indeed a creative mind behind the birthing of our universe, then you'll likely believe that that same creator designed and made life as we know it too. And if that's the case, you'll have to prepare to at least to attempt to understand the technology employed in creating life, the universe, and everything. Because we'll be talking about the greatest scientist of all time. And if you think that our AI today is advanced, well, wait till you see what was going on billions of years ago. Blows our AI out of the water. However, on the other hand, if you believe that the creation of the universe was just a lucky mishap, then you'll also believe that all life, matter, space, time, and reality, including you at this very moment using your own rational thinking brain right now, you will believe that everything was made by nothing. Nothing more than a series of unexplained accidents with no intelligence, no purpose, and no meaning behind any of them. So, we've got only two possible options to explore here. It is a 50-50 situation. The universe and life as we know it was either designed by something more intelligent than you, me, and all of us, or it happened by accident with no intelligent input whatsoever. So, it's the Big Bang. Was it an accident or was it designed? So, it's scientifically accepted that the universe did have a definite beginning. The beginning was 13.8 billion years ago, and it began from nothing. This is the Big Bang. I'm going to explain it very simply. So imagine in this blank, black expanse of nothing, imagine a tiny, dense space of energy, something the size of an atom. From this invisible place burst the whole universe with all of its physical materials and components to create the trillions and trillions of galaxies, planets, and stars. So, in an instant flash of light, this explosion from a point smaller than the tip of one of your eyelashes expanded faster than the speed of light. So fast that within the first few seconds, the brand new, never seen before universe the Big Bang created was full of physical matter that wasn't there before. Matter that made rocks, which formed planets and burning stars, shot out across billions of miles, along with all other materials, chemicals, particles, gases required to form everything the universe needs to function. Everything you and I need to survive, from the air to breathe, to water to drink. Everything was made in a flash, including all scientific laws to maintain the universe, like mathematics, physics, and chemistry. These things were created at the very same moment as the Big Bang. It's a bit mind-boggling, but it does get easy, I think. As well as the things we can see, the Big Bang, of course, created the things that we can't, like gravity, and the recently discovered but yet to be explained or understood. And I'll tell you what, when I do tell you a bit about it, you will think straight out of a science fiction movie, dark matter and dark energy. These are invisible supernatural forces, which we'll get to in a moment. But all of this is easy to say, but it is truly impossible to imagine. It's bonkers, actually, but it's certainly true that the universe was created by one very big expansion, which occurred instantaneously from nowhere and out of nothing. Now, to get an understanding of what true nothingness is, a completely empty room is not nothingness. If I emptied this room of the painting, the chest, and all the ornaments and bits and pieces of the sofa I'm sat on it, if I emptied this room of all furnishings, including the dog who sat over there, it would not be an empty room, because there is air, there's light, and there are particles present in the space which we can't see. And in this space where the universe was made, there was literally nothing. No air, no light, no particles, no chemicals, just nothing. Hard to comprehend. In fact, the ancient Greek philosopher Aristotle, I remember reading recently, tried to describe thousands of years ago what nothing truly is, and even he struggled with the concept. The best he could do was this, quote direct from Aristotle: "Nothing," he said, "is what rocks dream about." You'd have to think about that for a little while, but it does sort of sum up what nothing is. So it is hard to comprehend, but it's also hard to comprehend how anything, never mind a universe, can be made out of nothing. And there is no one in this world who can offer a sensible explanation how something can be created out of nothing. But it is the only explanation secular science has when it comes to the theory of the universe making itself by accident. On the other hand, those who believe God made the universe say that they can offer a sensible explanation as to how he created the Big Bang, which created the universe. So, how do we know then that the Big Bang is a thing? Well, it was discovered. And the Big Bang discovery started with the famous Albert Einstein in 1916, when he accidentally discovered that the universe was constantly expanding. In other words, it was getting bigger by the second, caused by the initial explosion. This discovery, you must understand, was much to Albert Einstein's complete irritation. He admitted that he did not want this to be true. You see, Einstein and other prominent scientists had previously believed and accepted that the universe was not moving. They thought it was in a static and fixed state and was eternal. They believed that the universe was the only explainable unexplainable. It was the only uncreated thing known to man. And although it could never be fully understood, being eternal, no one needed to explain how it was made in the first place. Because if it had simply always been there, always would be there, then that's all anybody needed to know to be able to move on with science and with life. And when you think about it, that's fair enough. You have to draw a line under some things that we will never truly understand. Otherwise, you'll just waste your life worrying and stressing about this stuff. So the scientists believed that the universe had always been there, was eternal. Now, this was a perfectly acceptable stance. And in actual fact, it was a vitally important belief to some in the scientific world, because with this theory of the static, eternal universe, it meant that there was no need to consider God. No need to consider that there is a creator of the universe. Because if nothing created the universe and it had always been there, this meant that God was conveniently pushed aside from all universe theories. This was great for the atheists, of course. But Einstein's experiments proved that because the universe was expanding, still growing, and not static, it meant, of course, that the universe must have had a beginning. Just like a huge oak tree that grows from a tiny acorn, there must have been an equivalent universe acorn that started the whole thing off. But what was the acorn? How did it appear from nowhere? Was it made supernaturally? Was there a technology employed? Or did it appear out of nothing? Well, these questions now, of course, shook the scientific community to the core. You see, God was back on the table as a possible cause, because either the universe created itself by accident or God did it. There was no other explanation. This was especially irritating, of course, to the atheists, because the very first sentence in the Bible, if you haven't read it, pick it up and just have a read or Google it, in the very first sentence of the Bible effectively gives an accurate description of the Big Bang. And it says quite clearly that God did it. How annoying is that? Einstein was so perplexed by this, by the Big Bang expanding universe discovery and its consequences for secular understanding, that initially he was hesitant to accept it. He even added some spurious calculations into his equations in an attempt to fudge the findings and keep the scientific belief that the universe was static and had always been there, to keep the status quo. However, he does say that he deeply regretted doing this and later confessed that it was a terrible mistake to do it. The fudge didn't last long anyway, because in 1919, British cosmologist Arthur Eddington came to the same Big Bang conclusion with his experiments. Finally, Edward Hubble, you've all heard of the Hubble Space Viewing Telescope. Well, Edward Hubble in the 1920s confirmed that the universe was expanding by observing galaxies literally moving away from us using the new Hubble telescope. He sort of saw the taillights of the universe car moving away. So science then, in discovering and agreeing that the universe had a definite beginning, was now having to fend off claims that God really did create the beginning. Now, most people think that Albert Einstein was an atheist. Well, he actually wasn't. Einstein commented that the problem of God was, quote, the most difficult in the world, a question that could not be answered simply with a yes or a no. He admitted that the problem involved is too vast for our limited minds. Now, so although Albert Einstein was open-minded on the God front, it seems very clear that the idea of looking into God didn't interest him at all. He concentrated, as we know, purely on science. He did say, though, that he believed in a form of a God, but he didn't believe in a personal God that you can have a relationship with, like the Christians do. If anything, he said he felt that there is a God, if there is a God responsible for creating the universe, then that God made it, put things in motion, and then left us all to work it out. Einstein felt his job was to do the science and work out how things worked, not look for God. Then again, Einstein's beliefs changed over his lifetime, and they caused some confusion and anxiety with many, in actual fact. But he confirmed that he was not an atheist, and after the Big Bang discovery, he was quoted as saying that he wanted to, quote, Einstein said, to know how God created the world. He said, I'm not interested in this or that phenomenon, in the spectrum of this or that element. He said, I want to know his thoughts. The rest are simply details. So, generally, at the time, the God did it suggestion was much to the abject horror of many other scientists around the world, because by the end of the 19th century, this is a very interesting time, by the end of the 19th century, many of the great thinkers, writers, artists, celebrities, and academics believed that they'd solved the God conundrum. They rejected God and abandoned their once held beliefs altogether. This was the beginning of a new era for Western civilization, which of course, ironically, was built on Christianity. An era when the Western world turned its back on God and relied purely on the brain of man. Now, this was brought on over very many decades. It didn't happen overnight. It took decades, brought on by skeptical and vocal atheist philosophers, and especially fashionable scientists like the biologist Charles Darwin. I'm going to make a video on Charles Darwin. He's a corker shortly. So the biologist Charles Darwin, with his claims around evolution, and they are claims, it seemed to the great minds of the time that they had discovered through their own scientific advances, calculations, philosophical discussions, and experiments, get this, that they themselves were the most intelligent minds in the universe and not God. They just simply couldn't imagine anything or any being to be more intelligent than themselves. Now this, of course, was a self-fulfilling prophecy, because the more they told one another that they were the brightest things in the universe, the more they collectively believed it. The consensus of opinion then was that they, the scientists and the academics and the celebrities, they were cleverer than any god could ever be. It's funny. However, the Big Bang discovery had now infuriatingly set them back to square one in their arguments with those that said God was a lot cleverer than man, and he was the one who had made the universe. And I've got to tell you that the intelligentsia at the time didn't like the suggestion one bit. A hand grenade was set off. But then again, in the scientific community, not everyone in that new modern academic world discounted God. Many scientists argued that without a creator of man, thinking, calculating, and science was simply not possible. God, they said, gave us the minds and the intelligence to do science. In fact, prior to the new atheist movement, science and Christianity had worked hand in hand perfectly well and had done for centuries. It's how the Western world developed. Advancements came through studying nature and carrying out experiments, attempting to explain and work out how God designed and made everything we see around us, from planetary systems to animals, plants, and to chemicals. But after the atheist movement took off, scientists now began to look at nature and our world very differently. They now try to explain how everything we see around us was not made by God. They tried to see how everything around us had made itself by accident. Complete mind change. However, Sir William Bragg, a Nobel laureate in physics, maintained that both faith and science were necessary tools for understanding different aspects of reality and getting an understanding of the world. He said, and I quote, "Christianity and science are opposed, but only in the sense that my thumb and forefinger are opposed, and between them I can grasp everything." Now, before I conclude, here are 7 interesting universe facts. Some you might know, others I guarantee you won't, but do let me know in the comments. So, number 1 of the 7, our nearest star, of course, is the sun. It's massive. You could fit 1.3 million Earths inside the sun. Interesting fact number 2, if you flew in a jumbo jet from the Earth to the sun, it would take 20 years of non-stop travel to cover the 93 million miles. It's a bit bonkers. Gets even more bonkers. Number 3, the next nearest star is Proxima Centauri, and it would take flying in the same jumbo jet 4 million years to reach it. Now, if you look up at the night sky tonight, and if you're lucky enough to see the stars out, choose any 2 stars close to one another, the closest you can find, and just think this, it would take flying in that jumbo jet just as many millions of years, around 4 plus millions of years, to travel from one star to the other. Don't even try and work out how long it would take to travel from one star here to the one star there. It doesn't work. It's really not worth thinking about. Number 4, the universe is so big that some twinkling lights we see from the stars in the night sky, traveling at the speed of light, which I'm sure you know, is 671 million miles an hour. Traveling at that speed, the light takes over 10 billion, not million, I was going to say billion, 10 billion years to reach our eyes on Earth. I'm just trying to build up the scale of things here. Number 5, water. Now, we can't survive, of course, without water. The water is in the universe. Something made water. So where does water come from? I bet you've never asked yourself this question. Well, I know that I hadn't until recently. Well, one theory is that water was delivered to Earth billions of years ago from outer space by asteroids and meteorites. In truth, actually, no one knows for sure. It's all guesswork. However, our water supply is very interesting because Earth and all of its inhabitants who have ever lived have been drinking the very same water since the beginning of time, meaning the water you drink today may well have been gobbled up by dinosaurs millions of years ago. You see, the Earth does not create new water. It uses the same water that has been here since the very beginning. So where did it come from anyway? Now, water may well be mismanaged, and people complain about this a lot. It's mismanaged by people and water companies, but it's not really ever wasted, ironically, because our water is continuously recycled through the natural water cycle. So you'll understand this, the recycling processes driven by the sun, solar energy, which evaporates water from rivers, lakes and oceans. The process, of course, removes the salt, and then the clouds transport the water elsewhere and deposit it as drinking water. But even though the amount of water on the surface of the planet is finite, it does not increase or decrease. In 2014, get this, experts discovered an enormous underground water reservoir 400 miles deep below the Earth's mantle. The water stored is held within rocks which act like sponges, and it's estimated that this underground ocean holds enough water to fill all of the Earth's oceans 3 times over. Bonkers. And if it was all released in one go, the underground ocean would submerge the world's surface hundreds of meters deep. Now, the implications of the 2014 underground water discovery challenges, of course, the old theory of water being delivered to Earth by meteorites. I mean, how many meteorites would it take to deliver that quantity of work? It seems far more likely that the water has always been here and was created at the same time as the Earth. So no one knows how the Earth made water. I mean, actually, I've got to rephrase that, because we know how water is made. Water is formed by hydrogen and oxygen, but we don't know how the Earth put them together. Let me explain. Because by mixing the two gases in a laboratory, it is possible for humans to make very small amounts of pure water. But it is not yet scientifically practical in any way to make large and useful volumes of water, because the cost is exorbitant, and the possible chemical reactions due to the release of massive quantities of energy is far too dangerous. Making water is not dissimilar to making a hydrogen bomb. So how the Earth did it without blowing itself up, nobody knows. Number 6, interesting universe fact. So, scale, to get things into some sort of scale. Our Earth and its makeup is much more complicated than we think, but the Earth is minuscule in the extreme compared to the rest of the complicated universe. To get this size into some sort of understandable scale, if our world, the Earth, was the size of a single grain of sand, just the observable universe that we can see and examine would be the size of Australia. Sort of gets it into some sort of context. But it's not all about size, of course. The universe is admittedly gigantic beyond any real comprehension, but it's also so indescribably complex that no mathematician or physicist can get anywhere near understanding or fully describing it. Imagine the universe as an enormously complicated clock with billions and in fact trillions of moving parts. Imagine that. Each clock part must be tuned to perfection to rotate, swing, revolve, push and pull perfectly and in synchronization with every other part for the clock to run and keep time. One imbalance, if you know anything about antique clocks, you know about imbalance. One imbalance, one piece removed, one setting, one cog out of place, too much winding or too little oil, and the clock, the universe, would smash itself to smithereens and cease to exist. Interesting fact, number 7, gravity. Now, we all take gravity, of course, for granted, but if the gravity force was altered up or down by the tiniest amount, all life on Earth would die. Nothing would survive. To give you an example of how tight this margin of error is, if gravity was represented by a piece of string tied taut between planet Earth and the sun, you remember 20 years of solid flying to get there, between the Earth and the sun, and that length of string was adjusted by just 1 fraction of a millimeter, the whole gravity system would be thrown out of sync, enough for Earth to destroy itself in a flash of global floods, building collapses, loss of atmosphere, and death for all creatures. Perfectly tuned gravity, then, is just one of the many constants that are required for life. The fine tuning of the universe includes the flawless mix and balance of all the chemicals and nutrients required for life to survive. Take just one element out of the equation, carbon, simple carbon. Remove carbon and nothing on Earth would live or would ever have lived. These necessities, each with their uniquely individual properties and purposes, were created by the Big Bang in that nanosecond. So all of this and much more is referred to as the fine-tuning argument for God, which says that the universe is so finely tuned that it is mathematically and scientifically impossible for all of its constants to have created themselves unintentionally, in order, and so perfectly balanced for life. This is the scientific argument that points to the universe being designed by a mind. Right. Interesting fact number 8, dark matter and dark energy. I touched on it earlier. These things are simply mind-boggling. So science has only recently found that the universe is made up of 95% invisible dark matter and dark energy. But no one knows what dark matter and dark energy truly are. NASA freely admits on their website, look them up, that they're not sure either. But they have proven that these immensely powerful forces are present all around us. They know this because of the effect the unseen phenomena have on the workings of the universe. So dark matter is made up of physical particles, but because these physical particles somehow, for some reason, do not interact with light, they are completely invisible. Not even scientific instruments can see them. No other known material has this ability to hide its identity like this. Now, if you didn't know any of this was true, you'd be forgiven for thinking that dark matter, with its cloak of invisibility capability, was something straight out of a children's sci-fi comic. You really would. But although we can't see them, dark matter particles are indispensable to life. They act like a gravitational glue, pulling in and holding all the moving universe parts in the form of galaxies, planets, and stars. It holds them all together. But the equally mysterious dark energy is a force that pushes, stretches, and expands the universe with massive pressure. So the two invisible forces have opposite effects, one pulling, the other pushing. But rather than destroying one another, they complement one another because the contradictory powers are so minutely and mathematically tuned that they work in tandem to balance, maintain, and keep the universe stable and its planetary systems accurately distance any variation in the settings on either energy, too much of one, too much of the other, and the universe would simply self-destruct. All of this means that we humans can only see and touch 5% of what is really at work and going on around us. 95% of the universe is a mysteriously powerful and invisible force. Now don't worry, if you don't understand too much of this, you're not alone, because nobody really does. But what science does now understand is that the space between the planets and the stars that we once thought was just an airless void is actually pulsating with inexplicably dominant forces without which we would all die. So with it being an indisputable fact that dark matter and dark energy are real and invisible, here's a question for you. Would it stretch your imagination just too far to believe that they were designed by a creator, designed by a mind? Could you also consider that there may be even more powerful and invisible, therefore supernatural, forces at work all around us that we have yet to discover or will ever discover? Can you then at least consider, just consider, that it is possible that God made life, the universe, and everything? But if God did create everything, here's an even bigger question for you. Who created God? Who made God, and where does he come from? Watch my next video to find out, and do let me know your thoughts. Thanks for sticking with me. Thanks for watching.